Today we're reading Bamidbar Chapter 19, interestingly being recorded on Erev Shabbos Pura, where we read this chapter precisely. But now we're reading it in the context of Sefer Bamidbar, so we have to talk a minute about the context. So as we've discussed, this Sefer Bamidbar has these groups of mitzvahs, right? We just came from a group of mitzvahs which we explained very well yesterday, how it really is connected with the answer to the question, the establishment of the hierarchy of the Kehanim and the Leviim and everyone else, in a way in which we can understand by giving this story and explaining how this is really all in response to certain challenges, to certain questions. But now, this is the last mitzvah in this series. There's one more mitzvah that seems to not connect to that, although there's one way in which it's connected, as the Ramban notes here. But it seems not to be connected with that. It's not about like matnas kohuna. It's not establishing the hierarchy, the levels of access to the Mishkan and things like that. That's not what it's doing. One thing in which it might be connected, I don't know if this is entirely pshat, but the Ramban says it's connected in one way, which is that the kohen is mentioned here a lot, and it's also, I think, the Medrash counted, it says 9 times hakohen. So there seems to be a point in which the kohen is in charge of this tahara, and this is maybe interesting, maybe it's important, maybe it's part of the whole thing. If we connect it with this context, we'll say something like the Mishkan the Mikdash is protected from people, impure people, or not purified people, not holy people accessing it. One of the main ways in which it's protected by that is, right, in the general, and even when he is pure, a Yisrael or someone who's not authorized, not a kohen, cannot go. But even a kohen, or even in the ways in which a Yisrael could go, when he is impure, when he is tumel and nefesh, especially, he cannot go, as we've learned in Parshas Ba'aloischa. And as we just learned, the one in charge of that is really the kohen. The kohen is the one in charge of Mishmeres HaMishkan, right? They have to watch that nobody who doesn't belong should be able to go into the Mishkan, and that's the job of the kohen. And here we give the kohen also the other side of the job. So that's maybe the nice thing, like we've been saying. The kohen is not only the one in charge of the harsh hierarchical structure, he's also in charge of making sure that taking the responsibility for who will come and taking responsibility for the people that will not come and giving them blessings. We've seen that in Parshas Ba'aloischa also. Parshas Nosei, right? Sorry, Nosei. Berchas Kehanim. So maybe in this sense, the kohen is the one who is creating this tahara, this mechatas, which will purify the one who is tomel nefesh, the one who was impurified, became not pure by touching a dead body. That's the kohen in charge, and this is interesting because there's different ways of becoming pure. We learned in Parashat Tazria. There's chibas begodim, or going to the mikvah, which are washing with water, as the Torah calls it. And those are things that it's not the kohen's responsibility. It's just whoever wants to become purified, so he has to go to the mikvah, or he has to get purified in whichever way he gets purified. Here, there's a new kind of purification, which it's the kohen's job to do it. Of course, it's not entirely the only one that's like this, because this connects really to a series of purifications that work through karbonos, through a kind of carbon. So I think that's the simple meaning of this whole story. So we see that there's 2 parts in it, really. First part is the hakrava, the kind of carbon. It's not entirely a carbon. It works more like a chatas anis refes. In any case, a kind of shchita, a kind of carbon, which then what is left from that carbon, the ash from that carbon, becomes the purification. But it's for sure true still that the shchitas carbon and the whole process of sort of creating this heifer parah, it's a kind of chatas. Let's just call the chatas over here. It's a kind of chatas, which is similar to the chatas, all the chatas anis refes, which over there we sprinkle their blood on the mezbech and so on, but they all have a similar logic where there's a carbon that causes also a purification. Generally, carbonates are not for purification, therefore something called kapara, atonement, or for simcha, like a zevach, things like that. But there are certain carbonates, like the carbonates of miluim, which are also were done in this book, right? And again, in Parshas, mostly in Parshas Sefer Vayikra, but the carbonates of miluim, which are also their job, or part of their job, is to purify. So in a similar way, this is a carbon whose job is to purify. Of course, also a Nazir has a carbon like this, or a Yeledes, there are what's called Mechasore Kapara. Some tumas need also a carbon to purify them, just bringing a carbon. But here, it's not just bringing a carbon; it's that the carbon itself becomes somehow we call the detergent, right? The thing that purifies you. So that's this parsha, and that's one way of connecting it to where we're coming from. The Ramban says this. He says that it belongs here because it's all to tell us that it's all a kohen that does it. But in a broader sense, this is just really an appendix to the parshas of Tumah v'Tahara, which are really in Sefer Vayikra. Even the halachas of this Tumah. This is an interesting thing, right? And Tazriya, Metzora, we had, like I mentioned the pasuk, Tzarua, Zav, and Tumah L'Nefesh are a set that are mentioned in Parshas Nusli when we send them out of the camp. And now, when we send them out of the camp, we mentioned this. I'm confused. In any case, when we send them out of the camp, we have this three sets. So Tzarua, Zav, those are things that their way of purification is mentioned explicitly in Parshas Tazriya. And then Parshas Metzora. But Tumel Nefesh, the Tumel Mes, what we call Tumel Mes, or the calls Tumel Nefesh, is not mentioned. It's mentioned that he's impure. We mentioned also that a kohen in Parshas Emma, we discussed that a kohen is not allowed to ever touch it. We mentioned about a Nazir in the same way in Parshas Nosla, that a Nazir doesn't become impure the Nefesh. But we did not mention how to purify it, and this is the only place where the purification of that is mentioned. So it's sort of the wrong place. Possibly because it's a longer, complicated process, although the Metzora also has a complicated process, it's there. It's not clear why it's here, so maybe the reason that I gave is a reason, or it could have to do also with the idea of the expansion that we discussed, that this is the expansion, and in some sense, Tumel Nefesh is like the furthest, right? Remember, being entirely dead is being not part of the community, unless you're dead in a way in which you stay part of the community. But in any case, in some sense, and this Parah Adumah is also something done michutz lamachne, the shchita, the sreifa, all that is done michutz lamachne. So this might have to do in another way, and it has to do with the general theme of Sefer Bamidbar, which is expand all the way to the edge of the machne. We could also see, in some sense, like the story of Korach, or the stories of the challenges to the machne, right? The challenge and Shlach Korach. These are all challenges to the machne, to the structure of the machne, and therefore, in sort of being metapel, sort of working with what's outside, and now it goes all the way outside mechutz lamachne and can even purify that. So that's another way of saying it. So, anyways, let's read. So, as we said, there's two parts. The first part is the creation, the masa parah, and then the second part is the hilches tumas mes, or the hilches tara and tumas mes. So, first we have Hashem speaks to Moshe and Aharon, and this is its header. Zos chukas haTorah. This is the law. I think chukah doesn't really law means something like the ritual, the order that is always. A set order is called the chukah or the cedar. The order of and Torah is the teaching, like the Torah, like Torah's canon. We have many parshas with the header Torah. So that's, I think, chukas haTorah. I've written about this at length to explain chukas haTorah. Chukas haTorah says one more time also in Sefer Bamidbar. And this is what Hashem commanded: speak to the Yidden, and they will do this. They should bring you a Parah Adumah, a red cow. So that's this halacha is named after the redness, the Parah Adumah. It's very important that it should be red, probably to symbolize blood or something like that. It should be whole, tamima, right? Now, tani mum, that's every carbon is like that. And it explains, tamima shenem bamim. There's the chachamim understand tamima to be something to do with the redness. It should be fully red, but I think literally it's just the same thing as em bamim. And ashele ole oil, also we have something similar by the egle arufim. So a parah who has not had a yoke on it, so if it had a yoke, it's like it's a work animal. We don't want a work animal, we want something that is a fresh parah, so it's entirely sacrificed to this. It's entirely dedicated to this. And they will take it. So again, this is also a structure that we have many times here by the Shem as Isaac, by other things. The people, it's sort of their responsibility to bring it, and they give it to Elazar HaKohen. So again, Elazar HaKohen, that's also interesting. We discussed yesterday in the previous chapter. Aaron HaKohen, this story seems to be given in a time when Aaron HaKohen is already older or less capable of doing everything. So it's Elazar, of course. Maybe Elazar was always helping him, but there's some aspect of the giving over of the kohen to Elazar already over here, I think. And what will Elazar do? He will take out this parah to the outside of the camp, and he will slaughter it in front of him. Apparently someone else will slaughter it in front of him, or he will slaughter it in front of the camp, or something like that. And then what he will do is take the dam, like I said, it's very similar to all the chatois and esrefais, which we take their blood and we sprinkle it on the paraychas or towards the paraychas. Here he's not doing it literally on the paraychas, it already starts, other than the regular chatas on esrefes, which you sprinkle the blood inside. And even the opposite, some of them get even brought inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. This one, he's sprinkling the blood towards the Pnei Almoed, towards the face, the side of the Almoed, but not there. It's just like in that direction. So 7 times is the amount of all these kind of sprinklings. In some sense, what this means, it's symbolically, it's purifying the Migdash from the Tumas Mes. Since the Migdash also would have become impure, at least if someone who was a Tumas would go there, or in general, since the Kedusha of the Mishkan spreads to the whole camp, so anyone that's a Tumas Mes, somehow that touches the Migdash and makes it impure. So also the Migdash is getting purified by this blood, by the 7 times of the sprinkling of the blood of the Parah Adumah. So the Zrikas Adam, and then he burns it, like all the Parah on his surface. He burns the whole thing, all of it. It's skin, it's flesh, it's blood, all of it. It's insides, it's intestines. It burns all of it, all at once. And then he does something that reminds us of what we did in Mitzrayim by the Karim Pesach. Reminds us of what we do from Mitzrayim. So again, these seems to be things that have to do with purification. He takes these 3 ingredients. It's erez, a wood of an erez tree. Ezev is some kind of grass or some kind of specific kind of grass. And shnitelas is a shnitelas we have also in the Mishkan, right? Some kind of red wool. And he throws them together. So he burns it along with these ingredients. And that's basically the process of creation. Now that's the Ma'aseh HaParah, and then the kohen from doing this becomes impure because, and of course, this is famously said to be a paradox of Parah, but it's not really a paradox, because like if you take a detergent and you wash something, and then the thing that you washed with becomes dirty. That's just how life works. It's very normal. It's a very normal thing. So in the same way, the person that touches this, like touching dirt, so he gets dirty. So therefore, he washes his clothes, he washes himself, and then he could come back to the camp, and until the evening he will be tumah. So this is what we call Tvel Yom. So in other words, he's purified, but he still has to wait till the end of the day, because in some sense, like the day became impure for him. Okay, so that's the kohen, and now we see that the kohen himself didn't do all of this. As we said, he supervised it, or he's the one responsible ritually for it, but he's not the only one. There might be other people helping. The same thing for them; they have to do the same things. So now there's another step. Now, after this whole process was done, after the Parah was slaughtered, it was burnt, and the people taking care of that would finish their part of the work. Now we have a third person, maybe might have been the same person, but the point is a third step. After it's all burned, a pure person comes and gathers the ashes of the Parah, and he puts it in a pure place outside of the Machna. And now it becomes mishmeret, something watched over there. We called mei nida, water of sprinkling, water that we sprinkle, chatas, mei nida or mei chatas is both names of this thing. These are waters that will purify other things. Now this third person, also the same thing. He becomes tamei and has the same halacha as the previous 2 people. Now this will become a law forever for the Bnei Yisrael, for any strangers, any that live within them, will be the same law. This will be, so now we have the story of how we made this ingredient, this thing, meinida mechatas, and now we're going to learn what we do with it, right? So what we're going to learn is, if someone touches a dead person, he will be impure for 7 days. And what that means is a minimum 7 days, really, because he doesn't just automatically become pure after 7 days, unlike maybe some other things which might happen that way. But no, he has to be cleaned with this menida on the 3rd day, and therefore on the 7th day he will become purified. That's the literal way of reading. The Kris Chacham understand that we have to sprinkle also on the 7th day, but that depends on how you read this pasuk, either vayem hashlishi uvayem hashvi, or vayem hashlishi uvayem hashviyatar. In any case, if he will not sprinkle on the 3rd day, then will not become pure the 7th day. I think this is really saying what I just said. There are some things, maybe a nida, again, that can be discussed. After 7 days, they automatically become pure. No, it's not. Or like someone before with the Tvel Yom, in the evening it becomes pure, of course, if he washed himself during the day. So there is also something he has to do. In the same way here, if you do the menida, then in the 7th day you become pure. Otherwise, you don't. And there we have a punishment. If you do this, you're tumah, you touch a dead person, and you do not dischata, you do not purify yourself, then you're metama the Mishkan, and you get kuras because you did not purify yourself with the menida, and you're still impure. Tamayah oitamas, but you're still impure. So that's the law of how the purification of the tamas mess works. We still didn't learn the laws of who becomes impure, or how it becomes impure, or what else becomes impure, and that's the second part. So this is the law. Maybe we could understand that until now as chukas, like it said chukas olam, and now is the Torah part. So there's two parts, chukas Torah, there's the chukah part and the Torah part. And the Torah is just the instructions of who becomes impure and how, and therefore will need this purification. So before we just learned about someone who touches. Now we're going to learn that not only someone who touches, but also someone who is in the same tent, the same oil as the dead person, then he becomes impure. Any person who's in the oil or anything, any vessels, anything in it. Now, specifically, which vessels? Only open ones. Only an open vessel, which doesn't have a closed cover, tightly closed on it, at that becomes tumah. But if it's closed, then sort of like the tumah doesn't go into it. Now, this is not only a way of becoming impure in a tent. That's one way, if someone dies in a tent. But sometimes people die outside, especially in war. They die in the field. We'll see later in the story of Mechemes Midian, but that's the implementation of this halacha. So if you touch a dead person in the field, whether it was a halal cherev, someone was killed by the sword in a war, or just someone died, or a third way in which someone might find a dead person in the field. If he doesn't find a dead person, he finds the bones of a dead person, or a grave of a dead person also. Those are graves are usually in the field. So also it will have the same halacha, will be impure for 7 days, and they will do the same exact thing. They will take this heifer of here it's called the afar, like the sand, but the same thing, it means the ashes. And now we have some more instructions of how it's done. Interestingly, before that we just said yischata. Now it gives you more details how you do it. You put fresh water, mayim chayim water from a living source, from a spring, into a vessel, and you take a ezev, again, not the same ezev that was burnt, and add a new ezev, and you dip it into the water, and with that you sprinkle it on whoever needs to be sprinkled. Again, this entirely reminds us of what we did in Mitzrayim when we sprinkled with a ezev, and it gives you water, and it adds, the Pasuk tells you, we sprinkle in all these things that we just discussed, the oil, or the things that were in the oil, or the people that were in the oil, or someone who touched a bone, or a dead person, or killed that person, or just that person, or a grave, and it has to be done by a pure person. So this is the fourth person, right? We had the kohen, we had the cedar, we had the hyssop, and now we have the mazeh, the person who sprinkles the water. He also has to be pure, and he will also become impure, right? Same thing. The person who's mazeh also becomes impure. That's what it says here, at least. And again, we have this repeat of the punishment if you don't. So in other words, to include also all these details. If you are impure in any of these ways and you did not purify yourself, the same thing. You go to the mikdash, you're metama the mikdash, and you're still tumah. And all of this is again a chukas olam, a continuous order. It does not something that was just once. And here we have these four people, a summary of these four people who become impure. The one who sprinkles the minid, the one who touches it, so that's another thing, someone who touches it, or anyone who an impure person touches also becomes tameh. So if you touch a dead person, then you yourself become tameh, the next person who you touch becomes tameh, but the person who touches that is not tameh forever, only until the evening. That's the simple meaning of this parsha, and we finished this parsha.